Sorry. Go ahead. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Taz. So nice to meet you guys. I'm excited to be here to talk about your immune system. It's such a critical issue right now, as we all know, between coronavirus, the pandemic, and what the future will look like. I'm pretty passionate about this information. I feel like this part of the story is not getting told, and hopefully you'll walk away after this presentation understanding a little bit more about your immune system and how much control we really do have as we navigate talking a little bit about I need help. There we go. Talking a little bit about how your immune system works, because when we say immune system, I feel like everybody gets really confused and they don't really know what it is, but there are basically two types of immune system. There's innate immunity and adaptive immunity. Remember, innate immunity is going to be the immune system you're sort of born with. So it's sort of what you've been given. Again, I do a lot of merging of Eastern and Western medicine. They actually call this chi and believe that you're gifted with a certain amount of energy or chi in your life. And then what's left is basically up to how you live your life, which brings us to adaptive immunity, which is really how your immune system responds to the environment around it. And the environment can be many different things. The environment can be the food you eat, the air you breathe, the water you drink, you know, what you take, what your emotions are, so much more. But essentially we have innate immunity and then we have adaptive immunity. And adaptive immunity typically is what we have the most control over. Now, what is the immune system and what does it look like? Well, there's no simple answer. Unlike the heart or the lungs or any of those type of things, your immune system is a network. It's a very complex network made of multiple organs, made of multiple different players that work together in harmony to help you fight infection, protect your joints and your bones and your other organs, and keep you functioning well as you walk through and move through life. I have tried to put on this particular graphic some of the key areas of the immune system. They include, for example, your lymph nodes. You guys know this. If you get a cold, sometimes you'll feel your lymph nodes swell in your neck, or you'll feel them in different places. And we know swollen lymph nodes under the arm or in different areas are something to be seen by the doctor and need to be investigated. So lymph nodes store cells that fight infection and disease. We have the thymus, which is an organ that really helps. It's where T cells mature, and we'll be talking more about T cell and T cell mediated immunity in just a minute. We've got the spleen, which is the largest lymphatic organ in the entire body, the bone marrow, and then your lymphatic system, which I feel like doesn't get a lot of play. And in the middle of all of these guys, we have one of the most important players of the immune system, which is your gut. And the gut is the largest immune system. And in fact, 75%, maybe 80% of your immune system lives in the gut. So all of these guys work together to produce a couple of critical things for your body. And so this is a lot of science stuff, but you may find it interesting. So it's important to have the right amount of white blood cells on. And out of those white blood cells, there are T cells and B cells and neutrophils and macrophages. This is how we produce antibodies. This is how we produce complement factors that fight off different toxins and things that invade our system. But essentially, all of this works together to keep us healthy and well. Now, going back to adaptive immunity, which is what we have a little bit more control of, again, we divide that even further. There's T cell mediated immunity, which the T cells live in the bone marrow, they come from the thymus, and then there's B cell mediated immunity, which is where we're secreting antibodies to fight off infection. One way to think about it is most viruses, for example, mount or trigger the body to mount a T cell response. Most bacteria, typically, you're mounting a B cell response. So that's some of the difference between the two. Now, T cell mediated immunity is fascinating because this is where we have control. And we have study after study showing how when we provide the immune system with what it needs, then the T cell system works beautifully and helps fight off viruses, helps fight off different infections, keeps us primed, all of that other good stuff. That is where our energy really needs to focus. The B cell response is usually working well and in place, but also needs the right nutrients and the right players. But sometimes we don't have as much control over the B cell mediated response, but that is where our antibiotics, our vaccinations, so many other things seem to be very helpful for us. So those are the two different types of adaptive immunity that you need to be thinking of. And moving forward, we're going to talk a lot about T-cell mediated immunity. Now, when somebody comes in and invades your body, there's basically a three-phase response to the immune system. First, the body has to understand that this thing or virus or toxin or whatever it is foreign. Then it has to attack it. And then it has to store memory of the fact that this thing is foreign so it can attack it again anytime it happens. That's the principle off of which a vaccination works, that if there's memory, then the body will attack stuff and we don't have to get sick every time to produce the antibodies to trigger new memories. So again, this is pretty clear that attack phase is dependent on releasing a chemical called cytokines. And so what happens when you're exposed to something, for example, there's phase one for most viruses and even most, bacteria. There's kind of phase one where there's an exposure. There's like, something's not right here. Then there's the attack. And in the attack, that's where the invader is typically eliminated and the cytokines are released at that time as well. Cytokines are chemicals or messenger chemicals. They're good ones and they're bad ones, but when you've got the right cytokines on board, the good ones win, and then the body's happy and everything goes well. What we've seen in COVID in particular is that recognition happens, attack happens, but in those with poor T-cell mediated immunity, the whole cytokine response just gets out of control. And instead of eliminating the target or the virus in this particular case, it starts acting out on the entire body and triggers inflammation, which then in turn wears the entire immune system down. So it's almost like we have a 1-2 punch when it comes to this particular virus, where we have an opportunity to get rid of it in the first punch. If we don't, then it triggers what we're calling cytokine storm, where we start to really deal with the long-term effects of having it in the body constantly. And this is where many of the inflammatory cytokines get produced, like tumor necrosis alpha, and all of this I'm just telling you because many times we'll check these things, interleukin-6, interleukin-1. The protective ones, by the way, are IL-2, IL-12, IL-17. So you can, it's interesting because you can assess the nature of your immune system. And I think that's so important to do. I mean, there's a clinical way to do that. How many times do you get sick? How do you feel? What's your energy like? Are you somebody who's tired all the time? Those are some soft signs of whether or not you may have an immune system problem. But some deeper signs are essentially like, are you having issues all the time? When a virus hits you, does it go away in 24, 48 hours, or does it drag out for months on end? I mean, those are some of your differentiators that your immune system is either great or in great shape, or it's not in such a great shape. Now, there's one more little tweak to this that we need to be thinking about, is that when we go into that phase 2 or that second punch, many times there what's happening is we're starting to get an autoimmune reaction. So this is when the immune system starts to see even healthy cells as invaders or foreigners and then starts to attack them, resulting in more inflammation. This is sort of the mechanism by which many autoimmune diseases like lupus or inflammatory bowel disease or many of these different autoimmune diseases that we deal with in practice, that's often the mechanism by which they work. And even with COVID, that is what we are seeing, that we almost move into an autoimmune response and the body has chronic inflammation. And I'm seeing that in some of the patients where the majority fight it off, but we have a couple. I have almost like this autoimmune picture where they have shortness of breath and joint pain and all these different vague symptoms because they've launched more into an autoimmune response. Before we started talking about COVID, autoimmune disease was one of the #1 diseases on the rise here in the Western world and probably across the globe. It's a disease of inflammation. Inflammation is rampant in our modern era, and we'll talk about that and how important it is to track that and be aware of it. Again, we were just talking about soft signs of your immune system not being where it needs to be, and are you getting sick a lot and how you feel. Some of the hard signs are, do you have chronic inflammation? Do you have an elevated WBC or a low WBC, which is your white blood cell count, because that's a sign that there's inflammation in the body. We'll check a CRP, a homocysteine, a SED rate. There's so many different ways to look within lab work to understand where inflammation is. And then all this alphabet soup that I was spouting off just a second ago between IgG levels, cytokine levels, interleukin levels. That's a deeper way of assessing what the immune system is doing. So again, there's tremendous power to understand where you stand. I don't want people, walking away feeling helpless, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is me or not. What do I do? All right, let's take a second to talk about the gut. Because the gut, from Eastern systems of medicine like Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine to now Western medicine, where we have study after study talking about the link between the gut and the inflammatory cycle and between the gut and the immune cycle. So much so, in fact, that IgG or immunoglobulins are actually made in the gut. We need a good functioning gut to make sure we're producing the immunoglobulins to help you guys fight off infection. Unfortunately, gut health and gut disorders are one of the #1 complaints that we see nowadays in practice, whether it is constipation, irritable bowel syndrome, intermittent diarrhea, reflux, bloating, gas. All of those things are signs that there's gut dysfunction. And that in turn will compromise your immune system. And this is true across the board, all ages. It's true for children as well. Having a healthy gut really deems a healthy immune system. There are multiple layers to the gut conversation. One layer is good gut function. You're going to the bathroom, you're digesting your food well, you're getting the nutrients that you need out of your food, everything's working beautifully and perfectly, and life is happy. That's one part of it. The second part is, are you eating the right foods for you? Because if you're eating a lot of foods that wear away at the gut lining or alter gut bacteria, which is the third part of the gut story, then you're triggering chronic low-grade inflammation because you're wearing away at that gut lining, you're losing those nutrients, you don't have an intact membrane to pull the right stuff from your food, and that in turn triggers what many of us for years have called leaky gut, but actually it's malabsorption, and then sets up the reason for why you see the numbers that you see in your blood work, including the low white count, the high inflammation markers, and some of these other things. So the gut is critical. It actually produces our protective cytokines, again, that big word, which is, again, cytokines are chemical messengers that help us fight off infection. The gut actually produces the cytokines IL-2, IL-12, IL-17, and IL-23. So you're missing that whole arm of protection the minute the gut is compromised. So that's an issue there as well. So a healthy gut bacteria, healthy digestion, important. Let's talk one more second about that third leg of the gut equation, which is the bacterial balance. Bacterial balance includes, do you have the right amount of yeast or the right amount of bacteria? Is there any sort of bacterial overgrowth that we need to be concerned about? And because that in turn will trigger inflammation, and then that inflammation will trigger all the immune dysfunction that we're talking about. Now that relationship, again, we had seen prior to COVID with autoimmune disease. A lot of autoimmunity is from gut dysfunction, the body reacting against itself, attacking its own healthy tissue. That is why today it is so important, given this context of what we're living in and what we see ahead, that we need to have a healthy functioning gut. Okay, enough about that. And I see some questions. What I'm going to do is try to get through the information, save your questions, and we'll try to run through them all in just a few minutes. Okay, let's talk about getting to a supercharged immune system. And I really have divided this up into 10 key steps. And we really want to kind of go through these steps and understand them, because it really takes putting the pieces of this together to help you, really support your immune system. So a gut, we just talked about, a balanced gut, but what does that mean and how do you do that? Well, first of all, like we were just mentioning, observing your digestive health. Do you have good digestive health or not? And I think it's important to observe some of those symptoms. Again, it's constipation, diarrhea, bloating, abdominal pain, having reflux, not feeling like you're emptying completely. Those are all signs you don't have a healthy gut. What do? There's so many different steps to take. But first, a universal rule across the board, no matter who you are, is to get rid of inflammatory foods and foods that we know are really hard on the digestive system. And those would include things like sugar, alcohol, or highly fatty foods that are hard to digest. That would be a place to start. Now, taking that conversation a step further, many people have trouble digesting things like gluten or dairy because they have changed so much over the course of time that they're sometimes recognized as foreign now, and the digestive system has trouble with it. So much of what we see is gluten intolerance or dairy intolerance in practice. But again, that plays into the picture only if you've gotten rid of the kind of the big bad guys first, which are sugar, alcohol, and really heavy, fatty processed foods. So that's kind of one way to balance the gut. Another way to balance the gut is to put in gut builders. There are many gut building foods that you guys should be aware of and trying to incorporate into your diet. So bone broth, it has a ton of good bacteria in it. We talk about that from time to time, especially as we head into fall and winter, and for anyone traveling for sure, you know, having bone broth 3 times a week is helpful. And it was so important in Chinese medicine where they would make broths out of all kinds of things because again, they were trying to get the vitamins and the nutrients and the minerals and the good bacteria into their particular patient's systems. So gut builders include things like bone broth, some of your fermented foods like a kefir or a kombucha, even yogurt, when it's made fresh and not processed without a lot of sugar added to it, is a gut builder. It has a lot of good, healthy bacteria in it. So that's another one to include as well. Another gut builder that you may be surprised about is actually fat, good fat. So things like a teeny bit of ghee or coconut oil. Ghee is a clarified butter that, again, it's been, a lot of the protein has been skimmed off the top. So it's very, very clear and very easy to digest. Those things are gut builders because they help balance the bacteria in the belly. And if you don't have the right amount of fat, or you are on this very stringent fat-free diet, or you're drinking a lot of sodas, then you're going to mess up gut bacteria, and that in turn will trigger inflammation. All right, our next point in kind of building a supercharged immune system is to eat immune supporting foods. And I believe that says foods. Let me double check. Yep, that's immune supporting foods. And there's some foods that we know are better than others. And so when we think about some of those foods, some of what we just talked about with the gut builders are really important and critical. And then in addition to that, there are other things you can add as well. And I'm going to start with the foods and then we'll work right into vitamins and herbs because they're all kind of related. So when we start with the foods and some of the foods that we want to eat, you know, foods that are high in vitamin D. Vitamin D in study after study has been shown to really help the immune system. And some of those foods include salmon, fatty fishes, tuna, nuts. Some of your seeds are high in vitamin D. Eggs are a great source of vitamin D as well. And then mushrooms are high in vitamin D, believe it or not. We don't really have many fruits that are high in vitamin D, but here's where fruits are great. They are high in our antioxidants, in particular, vitamins A and vitamin C, which is equally important for the immune system. So your high vitamin A foods are going to be your brightly colored, you know, fruits and vegetables, the yellows, the greens, the reds, the oranges. They're going to have a lot of vitamin A and vitamin C in them, and that in turn supports the immune system. We do have studies that say that vitamin C is essential for good immune function. And in fact, we know it's helpful because we can see a viral load decrease when patients are given vitamin C. They actually saw this in China when they were doing multi-therapy, and IV vitamin C was one of the options, and those patients actually fared much better. So high antioxidant foods, high vitamin D foods, those are foods you can eat to support the immune system, in addition to the gut building foods as well. Now going into supplementing and thinking about what to supplement. So we've talked about some of the key nutrients, and vitamin D deficiency is pretty common. Many people are running low. We do want your vitamin D level to be somewhere between 50 and 70. So if you are a big traveler, you're stressed a lot, it's important to make sure and understand what that number is because it is so important for the immune system. Now related to that conversation is vitamin C. So often we'll put patients on some vitamin C. We'll put them on zinc, about 15 milligrams of zinc as well. And then the B vitamins I feel like are very important for immune function. And then for my stressed out, run around folks who are doing 50 things at once, jumping on planes and managing 12 businesses and all that other stuff, you know, for them, it's really important to optimize the levels of vitamin B because they will run through B and C because they're using it up with their cortisol production very quickly, so they have a higher need. So again, the concept of supplementation is interesting, right? Because you'll see conventional medicine start to shoot it down very quickly, but what we understand is that between the genetics you carry around, the lifestyle you choose to live, going back to that innate versus adaptive immunity, you do need support. It's just bottom line. For example, there's a gene called the VDR gene that dictates certain people will be low in vitamin D, even after they take it. So they just have a chronic need for vitamin D. There's another gene called MTHFR that dictates chronic low levels of B vitamins. So they're always going to need B vitamins, even when they're eating, you know, in a very pristine manner. I have a lot of people that tell me, oh, well, I don't need vitamins and I don't need any support because I eat well. It couldn't be further from the truth. Even our best, cleanest eaters, because of who they are, the life they lead, and the genetics they have, and the environment we have today, still need support. So that's where those are kind of my top picks from the vitamin world. Now there are herbs handed down over thousands of years from Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine that we know work beautifully for the immune system, and research is now backing that up. My favorite is astragalus. I feel like I've plugged astragalus so much so that they owe me something. But anyhow, astragalus is an herb used in Chinese medicine. It's been shown to enhance T-cell mediated immunity and to improve immune function, to reduce viral loads, bacterial loads, and it may even play a role in cancer management. So astragalus is one of my favorites, and one of my products, we paired it with vitamin C and with zinc to really have a powerhouse formula. But I am such a believer in it. I've been using it for years. And that is one, if again, you're in that high stress, high constant movement lifestyle, let's say, then I would go on astragalus every single day. And then when you feel bad, you increase it to 3 times a day. So astragalus is a great one. Andrographis is another one. Turmeric actually helps both inflammation and helps the immune system. So that's one I like too. Taking about 2 to 3 grams of turmeric a day is protective as well. And then we have some others. We have Triphala, which is from the world of Ayurveda. That's an immune supporting herb. And then last but not least, and there are others, there's garlic, which we know is helpful, but elderberry is helpful. There's some debate around elderberry because we're not sure if it creates something called cytokine storm, which we talked about earlier, where it helps with the first punch, but it may make that second punch worse. So I think elderberry is great from a preventive standpoint, but once you're full into an illness, you probably need to stop it, switch to an astragalus or one of these other things instead. So those are some of my favorite immune supporting herbs. And that combination, those first 4 points that we see on this particular slide are all an intent to prevent cytokine storm. Because once you get into that second punch, then it becomes very difficult to turn the body's immunoreactivity off. That's where you're throwing everything at it. You're throwing medications, you're doing all kinds of things to get that response to calm down. And so you want to have all of this in place. Now, moving on to other things you can do to still prevent cytokine storm. Sleep is incredibly important in getting deep and consistent sleep, at least 6 to 8 hours per night. And for those of you that, again, may be on altered sleep schedules, then you have to do a lot of self-care if you're going to skimp on sleep or skip your sleep number of hours of sleep. So if you've had a rough night or a rough travel day, maybe the next day you get a massage, you do acupuncture, you do some of these other modalities that calm cortisol down and help the body to rest, because we know the immune system works well when the body is in more of a resting state and has had time to heal. Hydration is so incredibly important. So many of us, even myself, forget to hydrate because we're just running around and doing a million different things. But that's hydration across the board. That's nasal hydration, so putting saline in your nose. That is oral hydration, making sure you're well hydrated, especially if you're moving around, because that, again, is going to help you. Your lymphatics, if you're sitting a lot and not moving around a lot, play a role, as we saw in the very first infographic there, where your lymphatics are an important part of the immune system. I think any sort of movement helps. Yoga is incredible for the lymphatics with the inversions and the twists and the turns. You can't make time for yoga, jumping jacks, rebounding. Those are other ways to help with kind of getting your lymphatics moving and kind of getting your immune system primed. And then these last 2 points are really important as well. And I want to make sure you catch those as well. Toxicity is an increasing concern across the board. And I think it's been fascinating during the pandemic and the quarantine, as many of us we're not moving around as much, how air quality improved and the earth even looked different from up above. So we are bombarded by toxins at any given moment in our food, in the products we put on our face and our skin, you know, in what we spray in our homes, our cleaners. You know, there's so many places that we're exposed to different levels of toxins that accumulate and at some point trigger disease and cause immune reactivity. Now, I can give you an example, like some of my patients that grew up near golf courses or on farms have a lot of autoimmune or kind of neurodegenerative diseases because, again, the toxic load of chemicals that they were exposed to on any given day was significantly high. It's the same thing you hear about more cancer cases in certain towns or by certain water bodies. Again, it's all connected. Our toxic load matters. Your starting steps might be to look at the quality of your food, to buy organic, especially what is on the list of the Dirty Dozen by the Environmental Working Group, and to maybe clean up what's used within what you can control, which is usually your home and your immediate environment. Once you get to work or once you're in a hotel or other places, it's harder to control that. But at least controlling the places you are inhabiting the most, you know, that's a great place to start. And then this last point is just as important. I mean, I think stress and emotions, at the end of the day, you could do everything else right on this list, and it'll give you more bandwidth to manage stress when the stress hits. But if you don't have a stress management and self-care plan, the immune system will crash. I have story after story of people that have undergone trauma or have been through a divorce or have lost someone, and then you look at a timeline and sure enough, a year later or 2 years later, they've developed an autoimmune disease or they're getting sick all the time. This is why we call the immune system your sixth vital sign, and we feel like it's so important for you to pay attention to it and understand that the connection between stress, your digestive health, and your immune system is very much wound up together. So if you are stressed, because we all are right now, you know, how do you manage it? Do you have 20 minutes in the morning for yourself? Do you have 20 minutes at night for yourself? Do you journal? Do you do breath work? Do you meditate or pray? What's your exercise routine like? But no matter where you are, you should have a bag of tricks that drop that stress load from 100 to at least 50 so that you can kind of be okay with what's going on and you have opportunity to refuel and replenish. Because again, when that cortisol spikes, it wears the immune system down. The chemistry follows as this: cortisol goes up, insulin goes up, blood sugar goes up, your immune system crashes. So again, manage stress, understand your self-care is such a critical part of the immune response. Okay, that was a lot of information on that slide, but basically this is a simpler way of thinking and looking at it. If you only want to have like 4 main areas to focus to keep your immune system super optimized and super primed. So your gut, if you don't do anything else, let's really pay attention to gut health and digestive health. We think that that is incredibly important. Number 2 is food, really understanding that getting the right diet is critical to healthy immune function. What you can do, let me give you some actionable steps on each of these. So let's go back to gut for a second. So at least add a probiotic. If you're not experiencing a lot of digestive issues and you don't know where to start, let's at least add a probiotic. Probiotics add good bacteria to your belly. And that's one way for you to begin the discussion between yourself and your gut. So a good probiotic has about 20 billion units in it with a mix of different bacteria, 4 or 5 different bacterial strains, and that's your starting point. When it comes to food, following an anti-inflammatory diet, and this includes things like dropping gluten to 1 serving a day. Gluten, remember, is the protein in wheat, and it's often in our breads and pastas and cereals. So drop that to 1 serving a day. Increase your plant-based foods. Drop dairy to 1 serving a day. That's very hard on the digestive system. And minimize sugar to the best of your ability. I always give numbers, keeping it under about 3 teaspoons per day or 25 grams. For those of you who drink a lot of alcohol, your alcohol is your sugar budget. So if you're drinking every night, then you're getting an incredible load of sugar and yeast into your system, which again, remember the chemistry says that that in turn is going to trigger inflammation, it's going to spike insulin, and that is going to cause other issues down the road, including weight gain, but not limited to weight gain. So those would be my rules. Watch the sugar, watch the alcohol, lower gluten, lower dairy, increase plant-based foods, and really pay attention to foods that make you feel good and foods that just wear you down, because they're probably having a certain chemistry effect on you as well. All right, moving on to micronutrients and thinking about what to do there. Micronutrients, some of what we talked about already. So if you are trying to figure out, and we're just having a conversation about the immune system, we're not having a conversation about anything else, here's what I would do. Assuming you're an adult and a healthy adult, I would do at least 1 to 2 grams of vitamin C daily. I would do 15 milligrams of zinc every day. I would be on at least 1,000 to 2,000 units of vitamin D daily. And that's a great place to begin in terms of trying to optimize your immune system. Now, here's the fun part. The minute you feel bad, you can double everything I just said and do it for, you know, the first 48 to 72 hours of an illness. And we find that that helps to knock out the viral load. So you want to be really aggressive on the front end with this stuff, because we know it makes a difference. With the herbs, again, astragalus, I like anywhere from 500 milligrams to 1 gram daily. And again, moving it to 2 or 3 times a day when you start to feel bad. There is also some of the other things like triphala that we talked about, with about 1 gram a day, elderberry, 500 milligrams to 1 gram a day, all of those super helpful. I'm gonna add one more in, just in relationship to what we see going on right now. We know that pelargonium, which is from geranium, the geranium flower, actually helps to thin mucus secretions and can help us with overall sort of viral response, but also not succumbing to deeper respiratory infections, limiting things to maybe a cough or cold, but nothing more. So those are some of the herbal supplements I like as well. So that's a rundown of kind of the key points of your immune system and all the different things you can do to help in terms of getting good immune health. If you have more questions, we have so many resources. We have the immune guide that is up on my website at drtaz.com. And then we are doing virtual consults right now that are 50% off. And then just for this crowd for the next 24 hours, we are doing 20% off of both the Dr. Taz site and the East-West site as well. So I think I'll stop there and take some questions, because we have plenty of time for questions.
Yep. So the first question is, do you think vitamin A offers any immune system benefits?
Yes, we know vitamin A is a part of T-cell mediated immunity, and we know it does have benefits. So again, remember we talked about those high vitamin A foods like the, you know, leafy greens, carrots, the squashes, those type of things are super helpful.
Great. What about quercetin?
Quercetin is great. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's also an antihistamine. It is found in apples. That's probably one of the most common sources. It is not as directly immune delivering as some of the other things that we mentioned today. I love it. I use it a lot in allergy season for many folks. I use it in autoimmunity when my patients have autoimmune conditions. But when I'm just thinking immune system, when you kind of put me in that sphere, it would not be one of my first picks.
And if you were to pick it, what about the dosage?
So if I was to pick it, I believe the dose of quercetin is around 250 to 500 milligrams daily.
Any recommendations with someone with a reoccurring infection, kidney infection, to be exact?
A kidney infection. So reoccurring, so a couple conversations here. Reoccurring kidney infections are usually bacterial. And so there are 2 places to go when you are not responding to antibiotics or it's coming back over and over again. One place is to look at your hormones. We know that women in particular, when their levels of progesterone drop, they seem to have a lot more kidney infections because their bladder gets sluggish and has less tone. So they retain urine, setting up an area for potential infection. So that's one place to go. The other place to go is to look at gut bacteria. Because just like we're talking about the microbiome, the kidney has a microbiome too, and it is often reflective of what's happening with the gut. So you do want to have healthy bladder bacteria, just like you want to have healthy gut bacteria. So taking the right probiotics, like the lactobacillus or the bifido family of probiotics, often helps to minimize recurrence of urinary tract infections. So my guess is that's that. If it's just urinary tract infections, you're not getting a lot of pneumonias or things like that, I don't think you have a deeper issue than those 2 things. But if you're also having like chronic pneumonia or chronic sinus infections, then we worry that there's an immune system issue.
What type of massages are good for the immune system?
That's a great question. So massage in general is thought to support the immune system. If you are in a plane a lot or sitting a lot, then lymphatic massage as an add-on or dry brushing as an add-on to your typical neuromuscular deep tissue is very helpful. I like all the different therapies. We do think massage forces the body into that lowered cortisol state. So I would say any type of massage, I wouldn't even be picky. I would say any type of massage is going to be helpful in terms of rebooting and supporting your immune system.
Awesome. Do vegans have a weaker immune system because of their nutrition?
Ooh, that's a tricky question and potential trap. So here's the thing. There are some people that get the vegan diet right, and I'm sure they're great, but vegans can chronically run low in the B vitamins and in vitamin D, which, as we've already mentioned, are two nutrients that are really important for immune function. Now, on the other hand, vegans may have really great digestive systems because they're not clogging it up with all this other stuff. So I think, again, it's really hard to generalize that vegans would have more issues. We do know vegans are typically lower in some of those key nutrients. So if you are a vegan, supplementing with those, I think, is really important.
If you don't feel like any illness is, if you don't feel like you're ill, what is your position on taking supplements? I see some people taking many supplements, including vitamin A, C, D, and zinc every day. Is it needed if you eat relatively healthy?
All right, this is probably one of the most common questions that I will get across the board. I eat healthy, I don't need anything. I feel good, I don't need anything. Here's the difference. Feeling good and eating healthy is amazing. I think most people can't even get there. But there's a whole different level of energy and optimization and prevention that is so important to understand. And I think that's why we're getting in trouble, because many people feel fine and look okay, but when I go to do lab work, they're low in B and D and magnesium and all these other vitamins and minerals, or they have some sort of immunodeficiency or something else is going on. So I just am a big believer that even though you're feeling okay, you got to know your numbers. You need to know what your levels are for all these different things. You don't have to do it over and over again, but at least once a year, you should be very attuned to what your B12 level is, what your vitamin D level is, what your vitamin C level is, your vitamin A level. You should understand your inflammation markers. And I think I shared those, but if I don't, let's do it again. But it's homocysteine, it's your CRP, it's your ESR or your SED rate, your white blood cell count. You need to know those. Sometimes you feel fine, but the numbers tell us otherwise. So you need to know those as well and track those year to year so you understand where they're shifting or changing. I would add to that really understanding where your hormone levels are, because I think that plays such a role in gut health and the immune system and so many other things that many people don't even know that they're getting into trouble, and they're getting into trouble because realize the body is an incredible machine. It's going to try to do what it can for the longest period of time, but it'll come to that critical mass or that critical load, which for some people has been COVID, right? But it'll come to that critical point where it'll tip over, and then you're dealing with a lot of stuff and having to be very aggressive. So I think the better strategy to all of this, and I wish we could do this, you know, just as a blanket initiative, is that everybody should know their numbers and then they should optimize themselves. And I wonder if our caseload would go down and our transmission would go down and we could kind of get our lives back. But again, that's a concept that's a little bit too innovative for right now. But for you at least, it's, hey, like, you know your stuff so that you can protect your health no matter what you choose to do with your life.
So piggybacking off of COVID, do you recommend taking anything extra when you might be exposed to COVID, like the airport?
Yes, I do think you should be on astragalus every day if you're a flyer. I think that you can, if you start to feel bad, you can increase the astragalus to 3 times a day. I do think you should be on high-dose vitamin C. And if you think you've been exposed to COVID, that's not the time to go out and run a marathon. You want to sleep and rest, hydrate, and get those high antioxidant foods in. Again, if you are having trouble getting in the 5 or 6 servings of foods in every day, getting that one Power Punch green smoothie in daily is helpful too. So that would be where I would take that. And I actually have a product on the East-West Way called the Defender, which is astragalus, zinc, and C, and totally born out of all of this just because I was so frustrated with nobody having a conversation about how these things are helpful. So you guys can take a look at that as well.
I think we have time for just a few more. Can you name some brands for probiotics?
Yeah, there's so many great probiotics on the market. The key is to interpret the label. So you want a probiotic that has at least 20 to 50 billion strains in it with 5 or 6 different strains, and they've submitted themselves for testing. So Nature's Way makes great probiotics. Jarrow's makes great probiotics. We use a lot of the medical grade brands like Orthomolecular and Metagenics. They have great probiotics. So those are some options for sure.
I am celiac and have gut infections very often, no matter if I eat gluten or not. What do you think about grapefruit seed drops against inflammation?
So grapefruit seed, I feel like, is more helpful against yeast or candida, but not so much inflammation. So if you have celiac and you feel like you're getting inflamed a lot, I would do more stuff like curcumin to reduce inflammation, glutamine to rebuild your gut lining. I think those are things that are more critical for you.
Even though I take 10,000 IU of vitamin D, my levels go down, but my levels don't go up. What can be the cause?
So there's a gene, there's a VDR gene that dictates that certain people have a chronic need for vitamin D. You might be one of those people. So that might be something to take a look at with you. Now, secondly, if your digestive health is not on track, then you will run low in vitamin D because, again, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So for any of our patients that are not digesting well or they're spilling fat in their stool, they'll have a chronic deficiency of vitamin D regardless of supplementation. So you may be in one of those two camps where either it's genetically mediated or you actually have a gut issue.
If you are getting less than 6 hours of sleep, but take a power nap during the day, is your immune system still weaker?
Oh, wow. You guys are pushing it here. So, you know, a power nap is helpful. Does it reboot the immune system? No. It reboots you mentally, and it probably helps you throughout the rest of the day, but does it actually reboot the immune system? Not so much. Both the gut and the immune system need consistent, deep rest. And, you know, I've experienced this personally because I used to do a lot of night shifts and things like that. But when we don't get that solid, consistent 6 to 8 hours of sleep, we know we're compromising both the digestive system and the immune system.
Someone is interested in learning how to do vitamin testing and which test is there, and you know, there's so many.
There are a ton. So there's a lot that you can just do conventionally. You can do through LabCorp, Quest, and we use those in practice all the time. Then there's so many specialty labs that just take it further and get into some of these bigger concepts like, do you need a methylated B? You know, do you have fat malabsorption? All this other stuff. I use a lot of Genova in our practice. There's another company that I don't use called SpectraCell. What else have I seen? I think there's Dunwoody Labs. There's so many different companies out there. I just think, you know, whichever one you do, just go ahead and do it and be consistent so that you can track the pattern of what's going on with you.
Mm-hmm. So we have 2 more questions here. One is, what are your thoughts on Echinacea?
So I like Echinacea. I don't think it's the powerful immune booster that astragalus is or some of these other things are. I like it. I like it in pediatrics a lot. I use it more there. Again, people who have allergies sometimes can't take Echinacea, so I think that's the reason I've shied away from it.
Great. So someone would like to know, okay, we have one more question here.
Okay.
What flu, well, this has to do with COVID. They're interested in knowing if you have any opinions on which flu shot, if any, to be the best against COVID-19 second wave.
So I'm not sure I understand the question. So we have flu shots. The COVID vaccine is not available. The flu shot comes in different forms. There's a preservative-free one that we use in practice. If you're, you know, that would probably be the one to do, I would guess. The others I'm not so sure on, but I think that's what you're asking. But again, even with the flu, I understand what you want to do the flu shot so that that's one less virus, I'm assuming, to worry about. So if you're going to do it, I would do the ones that are preservative and thimerosal free and take it from there.
Great. Okay, so this is the last question.
Yes. Okay.
Do you believe people with chronic conditions such as fibromyalgia are more vulnerable to the current virus?
So they are more vulnerable because they have chronic inflammation. So, you know, one of the things we didn't talk about, because I didn't want this just to be about coronavirus, but what we were seeing with coronavirus is that people that had other inflammatory conditions who are overweight have the hardest time with coronavirus. And that is because they're in chronic inflammatory states, and the body can't, remember the 1-2 punch, the body can't mount an effective first punch, so it moves into the second, and then the body kind of succumbs. So the factors of inflammation, be it fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's, lupus, you name it, and obesity and overweight play directly into how your body's going to respond to something like COVID.
All right, I think that about wraps it up.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Remember that our virtual consults, I don't know where everybody is, but if you want to take advantage of those are 50% off for a limited time. And then we have the welcome code. You can check out our 2 sites, drtaz.com and theeastwestway.com, and poke around there a little bit. And then you can connect with me. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and active on there and having a lot of fun on there. So I hope to see you there. Thank you so much for all your great questions, and I hope this was helpful information.